Hi, my name is Melissa Enoch, Trinity Counseling Services, and I am pre-recording the Challenge of Change for the APNC conference. But I'm going to act as if we're there together. So what is the weather like? How's everyone doing? It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is the pre-conference presentation of the Challenge of Change. Not sure. Well, let's just go forward. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I'm a licensed clinical addiction specialist. I'm a certified clinical supervisor, and I'm a master addiction counselor. I have two offices located 5820 East W.T. Harris Boulevard, Suite 120, Charlotte, NC. There's my email, and I also have a location 508 Holly Hill Lane, Suite 102E. So good afternoon. Thanks for joining me for this presentation, The Challenge of Change. I would like to take this opportunity to allow individuals to type in the chat their names, their organization, their area, where you're located in North Carolina, the number of years that you've been involved with NADAC and APNC, and lastly, the number of years in the field. Also, could you include whether or not you are a mental health counselor, substance use counselor, or a social worker? So I'm going to give you all a few minutes to do that while I just randomly talk about, I don't know. Normally at this point in time, I will walk around the room and get to know people. Like, hi, I'm Melissa. Usually there's probably another Melissa in the room. So I would encourage them to do the Melissa handshake. And I would show them my B tattoo and begin to encourage people to get the B tattoo, if they're named Melissa, to get the B tattoo on them, and we would align that way. And so who on not being able to do that, right? Because that's when you get to know who's in the room with you. And if you're virtual, so it's going to be, you all are either in a space where you're watching this, or you're virtual, where you're at home in the comforts of your home or the comforts of your work. If you are in the space and you have the computer up or they're showing this on the screen, how hilarious is that? So I'm filming this from my office in Burlington, and you can see on the video that I have the sign thankful behind me. Gratitude is key. You want to always be grateful for your experiences. So I would have to say that I am grateful for the opportunity to begin to share this presentation. It's one of the ones that is near and dear to my heart. I am grateful for being able to travel to Asheville. At the time that we're traveling, it's going to be the 3rd week of April. Prayerfully, the weather is good. Grateful for the space that we are in. It's normally in this one hotel that's it's like on the side of the mountain a little bit. And it has hopefully it has the zip line is up. And so if you're wondering what you're going to do while you're here when you're not in class, maybe hopefully they have the zip line. And the last time we were there, gosh, this has been 4 years ago when I presented, I believe there was a storm and you couldn't get on the zip line because that's electric. And it's like up on and it was high wind. So you don't want that. So that's something to do in Asheville. I'm going to assume if you're from the area of Asheville, maybe you can align yourself with somebody. Because most of the times when you do a conference, if I was going to keep with the theme, the challenge of change, you finish with your hour, you finish with your day and you go back to your space, right? You go back to your room, or you run away with people that you already are familiar with. But I hope that if you're reading on the chat, or even as you're having conversations in the room, hopefully you're having the conversation in the room. Maybe you found somebody that I probably should have said that in the beginning. If you're in the room, you're in the space, find someone are you sitting with somebody with that's from the same organization as you? If I was a teacher, I'd be like, well, move now. Move to somewhere that you don't know. APNC has a certain number of areas. I know that I'm the regional vice president of the North Central. So I asked for the APNC area. Hopefully you'll take my number down. And the counties that I'm responsible for are Surrey County, Stokes County, Forsyth County, Guilford County, Rockingham County, Caswell County, Person County, Granville County, Vance County, Alamance County, Chatham County, and I want to take Orange, but I think Orange may actually be in another area. So if you put in the chat your APNC area, include where you are, and if you're in any of those counties, then I am your regional vice president. Reach out to me, bring me to your organization, let me share about APNC, some of the things that I'm interested in doing in the North Central area. Let me know if you have any outreach opportunities in your area, and I will have car will travel, no matter the gas prices. How many years have you been involved in NADAC? I have lost count of how many years, but I actually have, and this is where the hoarding begins. I actually have flyers from APNC when they used to do newsletters, and in the newsletter they would have who had signed up with APNC, and they would have some highlighted things. The only reason why I have it or saved it is because National Recovery Month is the month of September, and there was a couple of years where APNC offered grant funding for you to be able to do outreach programs in your area, and then you would send in your pictures that say that that's what all you did. And I'm excited about this year we may actually be able to do something outside this year and not a virtual outreach. The years in the field, when we go through the presentation, the years that you've been in the field, have you been in the field as long as I, where I started, it was the DSM-2, and now it's the DSM-5, and I think there's even a DSM where they're considering diversity, what's the E, exclusion and inclusion. They're beginning to look at some of the biases that the disorders present. And do you identify as a mental health counselor? Do you identify as a substance use counselor? Or do you identify as a social worker? That will be relevant later to the conversation that we have. So you have now gotten to know who you are in the room with, and hopefully you all took this opportunity to write in the chat about who you are. And so that's what we call an icebreaker, virtual icebreaker. I got to figure out another way to do that. Also, you want to have some notes if you got an extra device up. So this is going to really be an interactive presentation. That may be a challenge of change for some. Most of the time when you sit through someone, I mean, we're Zoom tired, right? You sit through a Zoom, you listen to the person kind of drone on, and you're just grateful for the hours that you get. But I'm gonna ask for help in this presentation with the challenge of change, because when I endeavored to do this, it was the first time I did it was virtual, and you can get to know people and see what their thoughts are and what they've done as far as the stages of change. And in this virtual experience, when you look for information, it is overwhelming, and I'll tell you why. Next slide for me. And I got my trusty dusty intern driving the car for me. I appreciate that. And I'm counting this weeks down for him. How many more weeks? 7? Lane's got about 7 more weeks, and he'll have a master's of mental health counseling from Liberty University. Matter of fact, Liberty University. Do y'all have a mascot? It's an eagle. It's a bird of prey of some type. Do y'all have socks? Like, is that what's on the socks? That's so random. And there will be more times where there will be my random thoughts. I was asking about Liberty University and their mascot, because I have a bachelor's of arts degree in psychology, a major in psychology from the University of Charlotte, University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And I graduated in 1993, and when I left, we were actually doing the UNCC, like the YMCA, but the UNCC version. And maybe they changed that because no one knew what direction your arms were supposed to go in, whether you're doing, is this a C? I think that's a C. This is not a C. So they changed it, and now we're doing what looks like hang 10. If you know about this looks like hang 10. If you are in a fraternity, I believe that we have stolen this from the Alpha Phi Alphas, if I'm not mistaken. But it's supposed to be a coal miner. Now, if holding my hand this way, it's supposed to be a pickaxe, I think, or his hat. I'm not sure what that is, but bachelor's of arts, major in psychology. And that's gonna be interesting, because when I came through the UNC of North Carolina, let's see what's changed there. Number one, every department now really has its own building. Where there were 12,000 students, and I forgot, it was more of a commuter college when I went, which was 1988. It's now grown to, being premier in research, premier in other areas. The major in psychology, the number of hours, I believe, has increased. I can't remember how many was then, but when I looked at the major in psychology now from UNC Charlotte, was 6 pages long. It also, however, it does not have a bachelor's degree in substance abuse services, and it doesn't have a master's degree of substance abuse services. But it does have a master's degree of counseling, and it has a master's degree of social work. So that is where my foundation started. That is where it began. And then I'll bring that up later. I'm an old person that likes to tell the story. And I also have a human services technology, or the specialization in human services technology, chemical dependency. And I was supposed to write Central Piedmont of North Carolina, which has about six or eight locations all in and around Charlotte. And it had a certificate program where you complete 6 classes and you receive the certificate from Central Piedmont. And then I have a master's of business administration, University of Phoenix, Charlotte. That was done on the ground at Whitehall. It was took about 2 years, but it was really accelerated 5. And technically, Trinity Counseling Services, my business became the capstone, if you will. And then when North Carolina increased the requirement in order to be a therapist, or to be in substance abuse and actually, supervise yourself, I endeavored to do the Master's of Mental Health Counseling specialization in forensic counseling, Walden University. And that was an online degree. And again, specialization in forensic counseling is going to show up again in that. And that was from 2011 to 2014. And I now am continuing to be about 18 years in private practice. I think you can go to the next slide, which will show Trinity maybe. Trinity Counseling Services is private practice. I didn't call it that in the very beginning because it's not what came first. I actually wrote a book called The Strength of Her Words. You may hear a hint of what that was about a little bit later on. And then started a nonprofit organization called Women of Strength. And then Trinity Counseling Services actually came third. And the Trinity keeps going. The mission of Trinity Counseling Services, education, enrichment, and enlightenment, which helps focus on helping individuals develop balance in their lives through learning about their limitations, realizing their own values and becoming so enlightened that they become fully qualified to share this with others. All right. All right, next slide. Oh, let me see. So I've done that already. We did the group interactive. So I rearranged my slides, but did you do it? So this is another opportunity for them to say, what did she ask us to do a couple of slides back? Ask for your name, your organization, your APNC area, the years involved in NADAC, your years in the field, and I think that I now have added, what was your major in undergraduate school? Where'd you go? What was your master's? Where'd you go? And what is your specialization and focus? So in the beginning, I asked for the demographics of the room. I asked for your organization, and I hopefully that helps the APNC, us, I'm a board member, helps us to know who is with us and who is virtual with us, because, data is really, really important. Then we can say, oh, then we know who participated last year and send you a good thank you for participating. And then who can participate later on this year, because this is the spring conference that is held in Asheville, and the fall conference is held in, I want to say, Wrightsville Beach. So they go east to west, which is really neat because who else does that? North Carolina Foundation Alcohol and Drug Studies, they do the winter school in Greensboro East, and then they go to Wilmington in the west. We also want to give a shout or a plug to ATOD, which is alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. I believe that they're going to do their conference in September. That's pretty doggone amazing. And then I think there were a couple of conferences that just were held. I think there's one that's in between or just before this one, which will be the recovery community. So I don't know about anybody else, but I am so glad to be back outside. Of course, I guess technically I've been outside the whole, because we are essential workers, therapists and mental health counselors and substance use. But some people closed, and people are in private practice. But what was your major in undergraduate school? And I'm asking because I found out some information as I'm doing the challenge of change. Originally my major was psychology, but you could have had a human services in sociology, criminal justice. So there were all kinds of others. So that is another demographic of where are you coming into this presentation from, what framework, what mentality, and then what was your master's? Are you a master's of mental health counseling? Are you a master's of, I believe there's a general counseling? Are you a master's of social work? And then what is your focus? What is your focus? So take a few minutes. Now, if we were in the room together, it would be neat to say, can all those who, because then I'm not really, yeah, I guess I am doing that. If you just have a bachelor's degree only, you will be in one corner. If you have a master's degree of social work, you'll be another corner. And then I would pit you against who had a master's of social work and stick you in another corner. And then if you have a higher level, like a PhD or something like that, I guess you would be in another corner. And then I would say switch. What is your specialization of focus? Because, there is a graphic that is going around for social workers and you're everywhere. I mean, are you in family? Are you in criminal justice? Are you in hospitals? Like, where are you? So I would rearrange the room only because, what is your interest? And then I would ask the questions, how did you get there? So if I was going to do a group interactive, and now that you've gotten the basic demographics down, why don't you put in the chat or take a few minutes and consider, how did you get to the place of what you wanted to specialize in? How did you choose? How did you choose you wanted to do? While they're doing that, I'm talking to my intern because I'm talking to him as if I would be in the room talking to somebody. So what made you decide mental health counseling was what you wanted to specialize in?
Well, I was in an undergrad psychology degree doing a lot of research focus. And while I enjoyed doing the research, I knew I wanted to do something more hands-on with clients. So I just kind of went down the list of what that meant in a psychology field, and something about counseling just kind of stood out to me as I think that's what I want to do. So I got another counseling degree.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I wonder if since we are recording, I wonder could you record you saying that? Do that. So we're recording and we're gonna do an interactive and maybe hearing from another individual. So I'm gonna ask the question again and I'm gonna let him answer and then we're gonna open up the floor for a few minutes to find out how did you come to the place where you are now. So go ahead, say that again for me. This is Lane.
As I was telling Melissa, I was in an undergrad of a psychology undergrad at UNCG, doing primarily research-focused psychology stuff. And while I had enjoyed it, I knew I wanted to do a more hands-on practice, or I wanted to apply my studies in a more hands-on way. So I looked around at the different options and routes that I could take psychology, and something about counseling just stood out to me. So I looked for a degree that would let me become a counselor.
Thank you. So let's just take a few minutes and there's moderators that are in the room. So if you're online, why don't you raise your hand and someone will view that. And if you're in the room, why don't you allow them to raise their hand and to speak out, because I am interested in that and it is going to be relevant to the challenge of change. I'm just going to give a couple minutes. So if anyone wants to share what their specialization or focus or how did they come to the place where they are in their career thus far. And I'm assuming someone is sharing and I'm gonna say, just thank you for sharing. Because I don't know how long people take to share, but if I was in the room, that's what I would do. I'd be like, thank you, I appreciate that. That gives me a good idea. Because what that does is it drives, where your interests are, what made you decide to take this as a presentation. Like, why did you pick the challenge of change unless you had absolutely nothing else to do? Or because of the hours. And I totally agree, but we want to make sure that you get what you want out of your experience. And so, someone else? I'd have to say thank you again. And I'm going to make the assumption that there's another Melissa. So thanks, Melissa, for sharing. If your name is not Melissa, if you were a man, don't feel no kind of way. It was either going to be Melissa or Bill. Thanks, Bill. And what about online? What do we have? What do we have there online? Who's in the chat? Because somebody's going to be managing the chat when this is being recorded. So give a few minutes. Let's see what's going on in the chat. And they're going, I have never had a virtual experience where she's actually allowing for people to interact. Where do they do that at? Listen, when in Rome, you figure things out in Rome, or you learn to modify a virtual experience. So who do we have in chat that wants to share either their major in undergraduate, their master's, or their specialization? And while we're doing that, you see what I'm doing here as a therapist. It's almost a form of therapy, isn't it? We're reflecting back to when we were in college. It was just yesterday. And if you were anything like me, it took me a minute to figure out what my major was. My original major was I wanted to be a teacher, middle grades teacher. And why did I want to be a middle grades teacher? Because I thought that I could be a help to in the people that the help that I wanted when I went to middle school. I had a hard time. This was, you had finding yourself, coming to your own, conclusions about who you are as a teenager. And I was one of the younger ones in the group. So I wanted to be able to help young people to transition through the middle grades education. Of course, when I got to UNC Charlotte, that changed. So then there was that. All right. So we're looking at people in the chat, and that's good information. What was your major? I'm gonna guess if I had to do 100%, how many psychology? I'm gonna say 35 out of 100. Bachelor's of social work. I don't know. I might do 45 for that. For 45 out of 100 for social work, 35% psychology, and I would guess 15% maybe criminal justice. So where am I at? About 80, that's 95. And then 5% other. I don't know. Wouldn't it be neat that if we could just do a poll right quick right there? I don't know how to do that. So I had to do it the old school way with a show of hands. All right, we can go to the next slide. Appreciate that. Hold on to that 1 second. Cause that's I see what I did there. I don't know what slide it is, but skip past it and we're gonna come back to it because I'm telling a story. Maybe not. Go back to it. Driving my driver crazy. No, turn here. No, turn back here. No, turn here. I see what I did. All right. You can leave that there and I'll meet me. So in doing this presentation, the challenge of change, I was just curious about a couple of statistics, and I'll read the ones that I found. It says the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration estimates that by 2025, the US will have a shortage of mental health professionals. 10,470 marriage and family therapists. Currently, there are 29,780 and 40,250 are needed. I don't know how they decide that they need that, but there will be a need for 15,400 psychiatrists. They currently have 45,000 available, 60,000 are needed. Out of mental health counselors, they need 26,930. Right now, there's 145,700 available, but they need 172,630. So if you're coming into the field, you have there's some space in a lot of different areas. There are more than, this is from the 2020 BLS.gov, 327,500 substance abuse, behavioral disorder, and mental health counselors in the US. They also give the number, it says that substance abuse, behavioral disorder, and mental health counselors provide treatment and advise people who suffer alcoholism, drug addiction, or other mental or behavioral problems. But then it says that there's going to be a need for 48,540 social workers. Currently, there are 109,200 available, 220 available, but they have a need of 157,760. Again, I don't know how they were able to come up with those numbers, but I thought that these numbers were important. APNC stands for Addiction Professionals of North Carolina. It has its own mission, and if you are in any of these categories, we're all in the same boat together. There are more than 700,000 professional social workers employed in the United States. But now it has also, as far as psychologists, 57,490 psychologists are needed. There's 188,930 that are available and 246,420 that are needed. There are 78,050 school counselors that are needed. 243,450 are available. 321,500 are needed. You're saying, well, Melissa, what does this have to do with the stages of change? We'll get there because it's going to be important to know what the stage of change is and where it is viewed and where the discipline falls on the understanding of the stages of change. Stages of change is otherwise known as the trans-theoretical model, formulated during the late 70s during research of smokers who had quit on their own. It includes the construct of the stages of change. A lot of times when you say stages of change, you think that's the model itself, but the model includes stages of change, but it also includes focusing on the decision making of the individual, and it is a model of intentional change. I thought it was interesting, and we'll see these guys here later and what they look like and know something about them. But this model was formulated by James Prochaska, a PhD, internationally recognized for his work. And it says that he is the principal investigator of over $60 million in research grants for the prevention of cancer and other chronic diseases. Thinking he ain't ever thought about going back to research. He's responsible for $60 million of cancer research. How interesting is that? That was random. Carlo C. Di Clemente, he's a PhD professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Maryland. This is what it had. He may have moved, but I do understand that he has since retired. And so I guess that's where you get the emeritus part of the name, that they can call you if they want to, and he just provides leadership. Says he's the co-developer of the trans-theoretical model, author of numerous scientific publications on motivation and behavior change. And this model, the original research, 1983 is when it was published. You know, I'm not even going to take the moment to reflect on where you were at in 1983. Were you here? Nowhere. A spirit, a vision. That's so funny. If you look around the room, people are chuckling probably. If you're on the chat, now you're thinking, wow, 1983, where were you? I was in middle school when this study first came about, and it was on the goal. It said they were looking at tobacco research, and it makes me think what was going on in the tobacco world, the tobacco land, that they needed to do research and cancer research. I wonder about the 80s, because I mean, were there warnings on the labels then? You know, as whenever you do a presentation and then you research it, then it's almost like research. So somebody in the chat that was almost zoned out and sleep because it's 2 o'clock, can you Google and see were there labels on tobacco in 1983 and put that in the chat? That's so random. And I'm telling you, thank you in advance, because I'm just curious about that. Because a lot of research and a lot of information and a lot of the changes happen. It happens when there's research to be included. All right, I'm obviously a list person, because in this presentation, talking about stages of change, it's not there yet. 17,200 articles when you Google Prochaska and Di Clemente, stages of change, 17,000. Wow. 16,200 articles, Prochaska and Di Clemente. And this is when you go scholarly articles, Prochaska, DiClemente, stages of change, I added substance use and mental health. 18,200 articles when I added, I took away the substance use and mental health and added substance abuse counselors. It went up. Between 2007 and 2019, and those numbers are significant. I've been, my Office Trinity Counseling Services has been open since 2005. It really didn't build up the numbers in 2007, and the intervention that I'm going to show you at the end of group has been, as I've been using since 2007 up to 2019, which is at the end of 2019, then there was COVID. So I actually collected the individuals, these interventions, which I call the crime chain of events. And it was with the majority driving while impaired clients, but it also included clients who court ordered mandated. So 2007 to 2019, I typed in Prochaska, DiClemente, stages of change, substance abuse counselors, and resistant clients. So that accounted for me. It accounted for the mandated clients because they bring with them a level of resistance, not being resistant to the process, but they did. That's almost like involuntary. They didn't like wake up and decide to choose that they were going to do class that day. They either had driving while impaired charges, underage drinking charges, probation, parole, and then there was a sprinkling of Department of Transportation. All right, so then I went, I typed in again, since that same time period, 4,300 articles, Prochaska, DiClemente, stages of change, substance abuse counselors, court-ordered clients. So then I was like, wow, it's narrowing. So I typed it again. So now I have 443 articles when I took away the court order and added the DWI clients. And then along with stages of change, we add the Jelinek model. So when I typed in Prochaska and DiClemente, stages of change, substance abuse counselors, DWI clients, Jelinek model, 32 articles. So that was a pretty good narrowing. So I wanted to take this opportunity to allow for some discussion about anyone's familiarity with stages of change, the use of this construct in practice, and any knowledge that you might have about these guys, Mr. Dr. Prochaska and Dr. DiClemente. What do you know about the stages of change? Use of this construct in practice and knowledge of the creators. So give us a few minutes, have the conversation, put your hand up, type it in the chat. What did you know before me asking you to look into this? What did you know about the stages of change prior to? And you want to speak it, or you can, because I can hear you, but either way.
Before looking into it, I knew a little bit because it is something we use in the office. So I think just your original shorter PowerPoint that we use in class sometimes was about all that I knew about it.
What stood out to you about the stages of change? And did you, so that's a run on thought. When it says model, what does that seem to mean? Like when they say that this is a model, a theory model, what does that seem to mean? And that's for the group as well.
To answer your first question about what stood out to me, it really felt like one of those psychological things where it's like, now that it's out and we've done research on it, it seems like one of those things that just makes sense. Like, this is something we should have always known, but of course it's not. So it's something we have to go about and start implementing now that we do know it. Because it seems to just make sense. Like, definitely just the 5 steps and doing more research. It's sometimes it's 4 steps. Those 5 steps slightly change based off the exact research, but I don't know. It just seems, I don't know what word to use.
I appreciate that. What about anyone in the space? like, again, you have someone there with you, so if you want to raise your hand, say your name. What do you know about stages of change? The use of it in practice. Have you used it in practice? And what do you know about the knowledge of the creators? Again, I understand that it's virtual and you're thinking, wow, she actually wants us to say something. Yes, I want to hear from you. And I'm pretending that I'm listening to someone speaking. And I didn't mean to interrupt. Keep going. Thank you. I don't want to put the moderator on the spot because that means they have to call on them and stuff like that. So who else wants to go? And I already know we know how to operate in group and we know good group rules and we're not going to talk over anybody. I already know that we're not going to do that. Same thing in the chat. Type it in the box. Hopefully we get to read some of these, or maybe the moderator says, well, someone in the chat says, you can do that. This is an interactive. This is recorded, but again, it's going to be playing and there's going to be an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. So let me just remind you all of that. So the stages of change as a construct. You're thinking, why does she still have her introduction up here? It's coming soon. Just keep it there. So this presentation seeks to share the usefulness of combining the biopsychosocial model with the stages of change as an intervention to reduce the resistance of your client's participation, decrease recidivism rates, and increase program outcomes. That's a goal. I'm like, I hope that that's what this helps. Mandated clients who have completed assessment for their charges, driving while impaired, other driving offenses, Department of Transportation and probation and parole clients, they present a challenge in their willingness to consider changes in their behavior, thereby leading to recidivism and creating negative program outcomes. When I thought about this as a presentation to share it with others, Stages of Changes was one of the models for me to kind of latch on to, is it, before thinking, am I thinking, am I making a plan, am I taking action? And it's a list. The effectiveness of the interventions was investigated by conducting follow-up interviews within 6 months and 1 year of their discharge. So, from 2007 to 2019 or even beyond, reaching out to the clients and see, did anything that we said or did in group help with making their decisions, things like that. Have they had recidivism? So have they gotten into any more trouble? Have they reoffended? Or did they benefit? What was something that they learned? Because when you view the interventions called the crime chain of events, it gets into those questions, about your choices, how the thing happened. It was hypothesized that the individuals who received this intervention would present positive outcomes, including no arrests, no reoffending, and no return to their original behaviors. That was the intent. It was believed that completion of the intervention throughout the treatment would increase awareness of their behaviors, leading to the ability to move between stages of change from pre-contemplation to contemplation, contemplation to act plan, plan to action. The other background information before I really get into the introduction and what really solidified for me to be able to share the stages of change with individuals is, the first session that you have with clients, that's the most important session. Although the first session, is really billing, right? You want to develop a rapport, you want to do the assessment. It says that this is often overlooked by therapists because the goal is to get things done, right? We're going to get it done, document where we need to document, and doing the paperwork or whatever that we can bill for that says that we did what we did. It says the goal for the therapist is to reverse this process of the traditional and then make the client active in finding a solution to their problems Um, that is from Nardone and Salvini. And it says the development of theory specific skills becomes crucial in establishing a relationship and moving the client towards change. So how do you, when somebody tells you they're presenting a problem, what was the series of events that led you to being here? Because if you ask them it, then they began to detail exactly what happened. Says there have been several studies that have been set out to design assessment measures that identify the skills necessary, but few have directly measured them. So if you can measure where a person is walking in the door, and then you can measure where they are leaving, then you're giving yourself an outcome. Um, and it says, and it's much of the research on measurement has solely focused on how faithful a person is to a prescribed theoretical framework, instead of concentrating on competence and performing a certain type of treatment. So we'll see what some of the other theoretical frameworks are, and begin to have a conversation about those. And it says, but little has been studied on the first session itself. The potential in the initial contact, its creativity and effectiveness, capacity to produce change, and assessment of adherence to and competence that will inform the training and progress of therapists. And I found that there are other interventions that people use, but again, um, the crime chain of events and the clients hate it. Um, you know, when we were running groups twice a week, they were having to do the crime chain of events each time that they come in, or you've done group and they're like, well, we did this already. And there's a method to the madness, is just getting them there, because what would a series of events, and it never fails. If we do it repeatedly, what'll end up happening is something will trigger where they'll say, oh, I discounted this, or oh, it meant that, or oh, I probably could have, because they're just checking out boxes in the very beginning. When you use the biosocial assessment coupled with the stages of change intervention, it is utilized to initiate change. The stages of change, some of the elements, and we'll go into those a little deeper later on in the presentation, but one of them is consciousness raising. You know, if they're DWI clients, did you have an intuition prior to even getting the DWI that you probably shouldn't have been driving in the first place? Or a dramatic relief is another element of the stages of change. You know, it's the who, what, where, when, why, and how. You'll see where that plays a part. But who were you with? And then if they make the clue might go, well, every time I'm with Lane, I get into trouble. Every time that I go to my cousins, I get into trouble. And then if they're sharing it, you're intervening, which is the root of the intervention. If you're sharing that you're not, this doesn't leave room for judgment, because it is how they're evaluating themselves. Self reevaluation is, oh, this is why I did what I did, this is how I came to that conclusion. Or environmental reevaluation, considering their environment, what put them into. And so it comes from a more of an inner place than say, I'm saying you could have been killed, driving while impaired. I mean, they could have, but it's coming from a place of their own understanding, and not um, me imposing my values onto them. Social liberation is, freeing them for what society expects of them, helping relationships, aligning with them and saying, I understand, I see where you are, I see what happened. Let's figure out a way to help you to navigate this situation. Counter conditioning. I mean, how many times have we sat in group and people are adamant about their behavior because that is how they were conditioned? Reinforcement management, when they share their thoughts or their feelings about their situation, being able to interject, good, that was, because then if they move from not thinking about the issue to thinking about it, then that's an immediate reward. Well, wow, you really understood the education, or wow, you really understood the pros and the cons of the situation. Then stimulus control, you remove the anxiety, you remove the sadness or the depression as a result of whatever the event was. Stages of change also has been combined with referral to appropriate treatment services. You can, if a person answers one of the last questions, does this experience have any impact on your drinking or drug use? Why not? And if they say, well, no, it doesn't, then you can refer them to some more self-help, or you can refer them to, if if you're going to drink and you're not certain that it's going to cause you to drive, you can go buy a breathalyzer machine from um, Walmart or Best Buy and carry it with you, and then that can give you some control over. So those are, that would be appropriate to make suggestions of, purchases and things they can do until they get to where they want to be as far as their use goes. Stages of change has shown efficacy for reducing substance use and its harmful consequences, because now they can see with this intervention, they can see where they are if they're thinking and as their thinking is negative thought process. That word almost left me. The evidence for post stages of change, increased participation and increased positive outcomes, because now they actually see that there's movement for their stages of change. And the key words would be stages of change, biopsychosocial assessment, screening, and substance use. So here's a question, another time to answer. I want to take some time and allow individuals to share their knowledge now that we've shared some of the elements of stages of change. Usually this elicits some type of response. I've been doing this all along, so it's not anything new that I'm presenting. And that was, I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different ones. Which one of those, and Lane is like, my stars, you call on me again, because you're my participant. Until other people in the room, somebody's hand is probably up, like I'm foreseeing that their hand is up. So I'm gonna say, you go ahead. We'll let Lane go next. What are you going to say about the ones that we've named? Was the consciousness raising, the dramatic relief, the self-reevaluation, the environmental reevaluation, social liberation? You're doing it in practice already. Which one of those have you already been doing, or several of those have you been doing? And we're like me, oh, earlier in the field, I've been doing that all along. Who would like to share? I'm not gonna call on Melissa again. What would be another name of someone that might be there? Alicia, a Greg. I'll call on a male. Lane says call on a guy that's in the room. Is there a Greg there? What if there really be a Greg there? He's like, don't call on me. Hiding behind the computer. I called you out, Greg. And if it's 200 people on the chat, you can type in there as well. What is your knowledge now that you know the elements? You knew them already. Which one do you feel really confident about using in practice? If there's a Greg online. Lane said there's a Greg. How hilarious. Which Greg? Greg C. I don't know. That makes me chuckle. Like the likelihood, and then when they record it, like I'll be online, like to help fill some of the chat. So know that I'm recording it, but then I will be in place to be on chat with you. So put a smiley face if when I called your name Greg, you were like, oh shoot, how she know I was in the building? Greg is a common name, or Michael. If you're in the chat, please type your knowledge and how you're using this as an intervention in practice. I'm only sharing what has worked for me and how the challenge of it can be and how it can help to increase your outcomes for your clients. Also, it says, I'm interested in what you're currently using when you have resisting clients. If you have resisting clients, which one of these do you think would be um, a way to diffuse their resistance? Which one do you think? Let me name them again. I'll go backwards. Stimulus control, um, reinforcement management. Think of one of our clients that we've had, and it just seemed like it was a challenge for them to.
I think one of the easiest ones to use with our clients is the environment evaluation. Because that for resistant individuals, you kind of take it off down for a second. Like, what outside of your control led you here?
It's really good. What outside of your control led you to here? That means that now it's not being imposed on them. That's really good. All right. This maybe one more minute. Who else? Somebody else has their hand up. Marie. Marie, yes. No, I'm just teasing. I don't know. I mean, it's like you said, you're here and you're thinking she's not telling me anything that I don't already know. Unfortunately, I believe that once you logged in with me, you stuck. So then there's that, because they're not letting them like top in, and so you're here with me, and thank you so much for joining me in session, the challenge of change. She has not told us anything challenging us yet. It's okay. And I'm not with the introduction, so let's leave that there because this is where I met my introduction. So again, I was a student at UNC Charlotte. You can leave it right there. Oh yeah. You follow me. That's good. No, you can keep going. I don't remember what the map I gave. Uh, I declared a major in psychology as a result of taking an abnormal psychology class. So I didn't declare a major till later. And as a non-traditional student, which means that I went to school at night. I didn't go the 3 times a week or the 2 times a week. I went at night. So it was a 4-hour class. And now I'm saying that out loud. Maybe that's why I'm accustomed to 4-hour classes at that point. Because I was 4 hours class and we would study one chapter of the DSM-3 once a week. So 15 weeks, some weeks we had double, and discuss the effects that each of these disorders would have on the individuals. And then, at that time, some of the courses that I took, and again, I would need to, this is where Horton starts, I would need to pull out. I actually have my old transcript and tell you some of the classes. Sociology was one, it was a few, women's studies was a few, African American studies was a few. But as I said earlier, upon further investigations, some of the more recent courses that UNC Charlotte offers now, of course, you in the undergraduate program, is the science and practice of psychology. I've got a few extra psychology books that I've recently purchased, and guess what? Stages Change is not in there. They don't even recognize them. Like what? I mean, they say behavioral, and then they mention Kohlberg or a couple other people, but you don't see DiClemente and Prochaska. Because so imagine being that many cited works, but not making the psychology book, missing them. General psychology, maybe it's in there. Research methodology, 1 and 2. You did research. Is there any mention of any of these? If you remember, is there any? So you don't see them there. Critical thinking about research. Then you have all these different kinds of psychology. So introduction to comparative psychology, introduction to behavior modification. I feel like you might, if you took that as one of your cores, I feel like you might get them there. But you're not going to get them in the intro, maybe to brain and behavior, child psychology, maybe not so much, adolescent psychology, psychology to adult development and aging. And then they have, there's some intro to, so they're all introductions. So you get introduced to psychology and women and gender, social psychology, forensic psychology, positive psychology. And then in addition to that, there's not one of those that is specific to substance use disorder in psychology. Strange, isn't it? You should have at least an intro in psychology to substances. So Note to self: if someone wants to look that up, maybe I need to look at it more, or maybe that's the thing. Maybe the colleges need to do that. But this is during, it says during my first year of college. Um, Also, we can leave that there. Identifying the courses required in the Bachelor's of Arts led me to question the amount of education and training that was included within the social work field, and if there was any presentation of substance use disorders within the field of study that would have presented an opportunity for the stages of change. So now um, I'm looking at UNC Charlotte's Bachelor's of Social Work, right? So now I'm looking at their degree. um, General studies, I don't know, maybe there. The field of social work, maybe there. Human behavior in the social environment. So we might see stages of change there. There's writing for social work, diversity in populations, at risk, community engagement, case management, practice methods, professional behavior, ethics, community, social welfare, and then there were some other ones, but there was not a social work studies class specific to substance use disorder. And so you may get a mention of stages of change, and then you might see you might hear of it during one of those courses, but there was not one where they would go together. And you might would say, well, Melissa, why are you, looking at psychology versus social work? Because I was told one time that I'll make a better social worker than a mental health counselor, and I was just trying to figure that out. But during my first year, so I said my first year out of college, challenge one. During my first year out of college, I worked in an after school program um, with third graders. Did I tell you that? I probably told you that because that's what an old person does. They repeat themselves. And this is why I'm thinking about behavior. It was this young man, oh man, so smart. He was focused on learning new things when he had his medication, Ritalin is what he took during the day. So I guess he had to take it while he was in school. But if he didn't take it or if he didn't have it, he would suffer from migraine headaches. And he would end up at the after school program. He wasn't able to interact with his peers. He would be in a dark space until his mother got there. And what I noticed about him as far as his behavior, his mother was more focused on his behavior management, because when he didn't have his medicine, he wasn't calm. He was a little irate. And I'm saying a little irate. I've witnessed him throwing his book bag, and so um, behavior management. But I noticed that whenever I would encourage him, I don't want to call his name because he's now deceased, but he was very memorable to me, because when, I could say, well, okay, what we're going to do is this is third graders. Yeah, he was 8. So this is third graders. So we were at a really nice campus. It was the Harris Y MCA in Charlotte, and it was a really nice campus, and it might be fall. And I'm like, what we're gonna go do is we're gonna go collect leaves. And and I would put him in charge, as the leader. And when he felt good, that's what he would do, and I would, way to go, way to lead us, or and I would tell him what the assignment was. He was like, all right, guys, what we're gonna do this assignment, and it was good. That was but the Ritalin, I imagined that if he was misbehaving this was the 90s. So if he was misbehaving in class, you give him Ritalin. Unfortunately, Ritalin is a stimulant, and I don't know if he escalated, but by the time he was 16, he was in trouble with the law, and by the time he was 24, he was deceased. Saddens me. So my heart has always been, I guess, um, I don't know if that's a social work theory or a social work tenet, but helping somebody, encouraging them. Challenge 2 or challenge 1 here. Challenge 1 would be, so behavior management is key. So my mind about behavior. During my first year out of college, I participated in several outreach and networking groups. The Fighting Back Project, and I should have highlighted it here, but the Fighting Back Project was focused on changing neighborhood issues to lessen the effects of drugs, crime, prostitution, and other societies. So it didn't dawn on me, though, that there was challenges, because it was, even then, it was social work versus mental health. We would end up, in meetings and having conversations, and it was focused on drugs and crime in communities, as far as, providing people with services, but, what about drugs and treatment? So that was challenge number one. This challenge that would continue throughout my career, focus on the manners in which professionals focus on behavior change. So I guess it should have dawned on me then there was something with the social work versus mental health. You can go to the next slide. Between 1994 and 2011, my work career was focused on working in facilities where there were different theoretical orientations used to assist with behavioral change. So 1994 to 1998, I worked at a work release and restitution center facility. And how interesting was that? Because the challenge of change there was there were individuals who were in recovery, and they had certain belief systems that were either supportive of individuals becoming abstinent or clean, or they would be triggered. I didn't realize then, but later on I realized we were completing social histories. And so, you have the biopsychosocial assessment, but you also have social histories, which can be kind of transferable terms, but social history is actually a social work term. And while we were doing the social histories, we would acknowledge their symptoms, and they would be specific to their drug of choice, which at that time you could use the term drug of choice. It was deemed either mild, moderate, severe. And even then, if someone was to look up right now, 1994 to 1998, that would be an assignment for somebody in chat. What was the use of drugs at that time? And where did you go? And what were some of those terms? Someone else could look up. This is where we began to use the Jellinek model, which was a medical model which focused on individuals progressing in addiction and alcoholism, social problem, crucial or chronic. They would be referred to a 28-day treatment center. If someone remembers the 28-day treatment center, there's some people that don't even know now that you used to could go and stay away for 28 to 42 days for treatment. And we're in Asheville, and it was the Black Mountain Julian Keefe Center is in Black Mountain, which is 15 minutes that way east. And then we would also drop people off at the VA Medical Center, where they could stay for 28 to 42 days in treatment, enter into an aftercare program, halfway house, three-quarter way house, or they could return back to Charlotte to their community, or be referred to either Rebound, Salvation Army, or the men's shelter. So that was that's challenge number 2. Therapists in recovery. And now what do you call, what is someone when they're free from use? And then challenge number 3, so we can drive. While I was at the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, 1998, the challenge of change was the use of multiple theoretical orientations, And I thought this part was interesting because that's not what I want. That's not what I want. I hope this is what I want. I want to share these because it says reality therapy, and wonder if anyone's ever heard of a freelancer. What is, then I lost it all together. Oh, cool. What is reality therapy? And I should say, so can someone tell us what reality therapy is? Do you know what reality therapy is?
No.
Put you on the spot. Well, this is where you're in a presentation and you lose your place on the slides, and you really want to share this information, and it should be in your head, but it's not. So you buy time and you do something like, so how's the weather? Does anyone need to go to the restroom real quick? Because we've gone for about an hour and 15 minutes. And, you would think, is there a break? I don't know if we have a break incorporated. So, and we're back. Reality therapy. See what I did there? I took a pause. Is any good presenter? Do we need to stand up and stretch? Do we need to do that? Do we need to say, Melissa, that's an hour and 15 minutes almost presenting. While we doing that, I'm reflecting on what were we doing in 1998. Every time that and this is like how relevant. Every time that 9/11 comes up and they say, where were you? I cannot forget I was working at Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, Work Release and Restitution Center. And it's 2001, right? And was in my office, and because I had been there in 98, so it was like 3 years. I was in my office, and Work Release and Restitution Center is like 7 blocks from Bank of America building. And the thought was they were going to bomb those buildings. And if you're a therapist, you're thinking, wow, that's almost PTSD for you, Melissa. A little bit, because they showed it on TV, and it didn't look real. And the guys was like, something is happening. And I was like, what? And my office was like a few steps from where the TV was. And I was like, my goodness. So whenever I talk about Work Release and Restitution Center, when I talk about, pause it.